The situation around a potential Star Wars Battlefront 3 is pretty fascinating to me, and it's one that is actually gaining steam in ways I didn't think possible in 2025. Now, not because fan initiatives and things like that can't come out of nowhere and really surprise people, but more because it seemed like when this game was cooking and when it was out, all I ever saw about the Star Wars Battlefront EA games were complaints until later on when, like it started improving and things like that with Battlefront 2. But I feel like by then, EA had pushed monetization features and all these different things, and they had alienated so many people away from the game and the previous game before it that it wasn't looked at fondly by a lot of people. That said, once they did start implementing a lot of changes and trying to improve the game and trying to move away from the corporatization of Star Wars Battlefront 2 at launch. I don't know if you remember the famous, we didn't give you Darth Vader at launch to play with because we want you to have a sense of pride and accomplishment when you unlock him. Like the old pride and accomplishment meme, that's literally from the EA Battlefront series. Well, they did manage to repair a lot of that negative press and a lot of the way that game looked, similar to something like Monolith's Shadow of War. My point here is, this is a game I didn't expect to pick up steam for a potential sequel in 2025. But there is a lot of people calling for it. There's a petition now with thousands of signatures. Do companies care about petitions? No, but it's still an interesting gauge of interest. And then on top of that, you have Star Wars Battlefront 2 on PC breaking its all-time high player record in terms of people on at the same time, people going back to these games on different platforms. People are flocking back to Battlefront, and they are asking for a third game. Now, if you have followed Star Wars Battlefront ever, whether it's the original series of these games or today's, you would know that the title or the name Star Wars Battlefront 3, it feels cursed. It genuinely feels like one of those things where if you ask for it, you have to be looking over your shoulder. Like they're sending Agent 47 after people, it feels like, to silence the call for Battlefront 3, because Battlefront 3 is something that has now fallen through 2 different times, at least. Now, there was actually a potential sequel, and I would argue 2 different versions of it that were going to happen all the way back in the early mid-2000s, based on the original Star Wars Battlefront series. I'm talking the one all the way back with like Pandemic Studios. Now, there was a free radical build of Star Wars Battlefront 3 actually for the Wii of all things that got leaked to the internet. You can find it very easily by yourself. I am not going to distribute it because I don't really know about the copyright rules around it, but you just look up like free radical Star Wars Battlefront 3 Wii leak. You can find that very easily, and there are ways to play it even now on your PC. Essentially, what this was going to be was a build of Battlefront 3 for the Wii, the Nintendo Wii, and a lot of this was occurring after Order 66 and kind of during the Jedi Purge in terms of its story, but with different eras, things like that, etc. Now, in general, the reason I bring that up is because, like I said, this is not the first time a Star Wars Battlefront 3 got canned, and so this is something that people, I think, resonated with and are annoyed about, is that twice this series has been run into the ground by decisions above the developers making it, and they're annoyed by it, and they want to see what a third game could be. So we're going to talk about this for a few more minutes today, but I do have a question of the day for you, which is, what would you want in a Star Wars Battlefront 3? And a video I would like to make, or a video style I'd like to start making again, is like 5 things I'd want to see in a potential follow-up to a game. One thing I remember from Battlefront 2 that I thought it was missing was costumes for some of the characters. And also, I would love to see if they ever wanted to go back to the old Republic era, like Knights of the Old Republic. But there's a lot of stuff that I think could be done with these games, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts down below. Now, here's the thing. It's not just players getting together to push for Star Wars Battlefront 3. If it was just players and there was a total lack of, any kind of recognition from anyone in game dev, I would say, yeah, this is cool. This is a good idea. And in fact, it's good to push for your interests and things you care about and tell these companies what you would support. I personally think a big reason Silent Hill came back is because of that. But I would say without any kind of game dev recognition, this wouldn't go far. The thing is, though, that there are game developers actually recognizing this effort. For example, I believe the way to pronounce his name is Matt's Home, who was actually a developer who responds to a lot of different things on Reddit, who had worked on the base release of Battlefront 2 and even the Celebration re-release of it, who actually went on to say that many ex-Battlefront developers would like to work on a new game. And, going on to say, me and having heard around my group of ex-colleagues, we want to get the gang back together. Essentially talking about how he wants a Star Wars Battlefront 3 and would love to actually make it. Now, also going on to do different things with this as well, which I thought was interesting, he did outline what a potential development cycle would look like for Battlefront 3 and essentially how they would make it work, saying that he does still talk to his ex-colleagues, many of whom did leave the company. But he said, if you hear me out, the way that he would do it is not doing Battlefront 3 right now, but doing a Battlefront 2 remaster for whatever future console is arriving in 2027 to 2028. Dev time with that being around 2 to 3 years. He said there's a laundry list of improvements that this game could get, in my opinion, and getting it updated was always on our wish list. And that does make sense, by the way, because it did seem like there were a lot of characters that never got any costumes while others got a plethora of them. It did also seem as well like there were ideas for heroes that were no-brainers that ended up not showing up, especially from the Clone Wars, characters like Captain Rex, Ahsoka, Ventress. There were a lot of characters that could have worked very well in Battlefront 2, the EA version, but didn't get a chance to shine. He went on to say, once that is a success, then start work on 3. You have a team familiar with the engine, assets, and really could kick off developing a 3 within a much shorter time span and working on feedback from a fresh Battlefront 2 audience base. This would be a 5 to 6 year plan, but it's far more likely to be a success. Essentially, instead of trying to go from the ground up, you remaster and you fix up Battlefront 2. You actually, which I don't even know how much of a remaster it would need. It still looks very, very good, but I could see them, making it look even better. Adding in a lot of these different costumes, characters, maybe quality of life feedbacks, things like that could improve the game. It's worth noting there's a ton of great mods on PC as well, where people very easily made their own cosmetics, things from Star Wars Legends, different character swaps, all the way down to things from the movies that didn't show up. So that would be very cool to see. And I do think as well, actually having a developer on board already drawing attention to this and saying, hey, there is a way we could make this happen. There is a way you could do this. I think that that's very cool. Now, that said, like I mentioned before, it's interesting because the 2 new Battlefront games, apparently I didn't even know they hit this number, had sold something like 33 million copies together, which is quite a bit, but it went on to never get a third game. Now, that said, Matt's Home also did say that he would not expect a Battlefront 3 to be announced at the end of this rally or cry to it, saying that he does believe there are people who are talking about it, and basically saying it would be difficult, though, or challenging to bring back the team that made Battlefront 2, saying we are spread far and wide, and basically going on to also say that some people went to different companies, like some people went to King, some people went to Ubisoft, some went independent, and that, that's kind of what happens in game dev as well. There are a lot of people who essentially they move on, especially when something they want to be made might not be made. Now, what's weird about this is it's kind of like the third time that I would say we didn't get a Star Wars Battlefront 3, because there wasn't only the development at Free Radical, but I also did see that there was talk from Pandemic that they had started work on it. But in general, it is frustrating to see that essentially there were these different attempts to make a Star Wars Battlefront 3. You know, there was an attempt back then around like 2012, and then there was also this attempt now, I would say, that people are trying to get people on board. They're getting the player count up. They're hitting new records on Steam. There's people hopping back on console. The attention is on Battlefront 3, but what concerns me is EA. EA, if anything, has become more greedy, I believe, since Star Wars Battlefront 2. And Battlefront 2 suffered and was really hurt because of EA's greed. Now, EA can monetize certain things perfectly well, not in terms of the game being good, mind you, but in terms of their consumers eating it up. Things like sports games. They're very good at monetizing it and getting people to buy it anyway. 2K is the same way. Very good at monetizing and still getting people to buy it. I would argue because they have a monopoly on the sports that they are covering with the likenesses, the images of the teams, the players themselves, etc. But when it comes to Star Wars, there are other options out there. EA no longer has an exclusivity deal to do Star Wars games. Like, yes, there are people showing up for the Jedi Survivor or Jedi Fallen Order series, and there will be people who appear for the third game, which probably will be the final one. Who knows? There will be people back for that. But in general, a lot of people have moved away from Star Wars slop. Whether it be Star Wars TV shows, Star Wars movies, or Star Wars games that are poorly written and poorly received, they're not as profitable as they once were, and there's a lot of Star Wars out there. There are tons of Star Wars movies, there are tons of Star Wars games from previous generations, many of which are now available on modern tech, whether it be PC or remasters and ports of them on things like the PS4 and 5 and Xbox consoles and even the Nintendo Switch. There are Star Wars games that people can go play. They don't need Battlefront 3 in the sense of, well, this is the only game I can play. So with EA, they don't have a desperation to make this because there's other competition out there, not just from now, but from decades ago. Whereas when they were making Star Wars Battlefront, the EA games, many of those games weren't ported to modern hardware or weren't even in development. And so they could kind of do whatever they wanted and monetize the hell out of it. That's kind of my concern with this is if they bring it back, is that what they're going to do? Are they going to ignore community feedback? Not the devs, but EA above them. Are they going to just push monetization again? And this grindiness that killed Star Wars Battlefront 2 and killed a bunch of its momentum and pushed people away from the game? I would argue EA as the publisher is one of the reasons why that wasn't as successful as it could have been. Their greedy nature is what concerns me regarding this, if it gets made. But that said, I do think it's worth celebrating people being so passionate, people being interested, people showing their passion and crying out for something that they care about, because at the end of the day, I do think this kind of stuff should be a collaborative effort. Not everything can be by committee, but if you're a game developer or a game publishing studio or a movie maker or a movie making studio, and you ignore what people want and you have this hubris and you have a god complex and only your opinion matters, that doesn't usually turn out well. It's very rare that turns out well. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts down below. Would you want Battlefront 3? What would your thoughts be on it? I'm interested to see those in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, you want to leave a like, subscribe. I really do appreciate your support on this channel. It means the world to me. We do have a Fortnite code you can use to support our channel, which is DJAY123. And we do have our own store, CosmoBunny.shop, where you can use code DJAY123 as well for 10% off your first purchase of transformative coasters, keychains, trays, and more made from recycled paper from damaged books. We take damaged comics, manga, magazines, and more. We save those from landfills, from going in there, and instead we take some of that paper, we transform it into a vessel for a new medium of art, and then we recycle the rest. So I'd love to see you over there as well. Have a fantastic day, and as always, everyone, stay shui.